The harsh lights of the infirmary flickered, casting long shadows over the rows of cots and medical equipment. John Drake stood at the entrance, his eyes fixed on the unconscious form of Bill Crossman, now restrained and heavily sedated. The room was filled with the antiseptic smell of alcohol and the faint metallic tang of blood, a constant reminder of the pit's grim reality. Amelia, the pit's de facto medic, worked diligently at Bill's side. Her hands moved with precision, adjusting the IV drip and checking his vital signs. The lines of worry on her face had deepened, each crease a testament to the mounting pressure they all felt. John approached her, his footsteps echoing in the sterile silence. "How is he?" Amelia glanced up, her eyes meeting John's with a mix of exhaustion and resolve. "Stable, for now. But whatever's affecting him, it's beyond anything I've ever seen. His blood work is off the charts, high levels of adrenaline, cortisol, and something else, something I can't identify." John's jaw tightened. "And the others, the ones who've fallen sick?" Amelia sighed, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "They're deteriorating fast. The symptoms are similar: fever, delirium, aggression. But Bill, he's different. It's like he's embraced it, let it consume him." John's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of their nightmare. What about the bites, the marks on the bodies? Amelia shuddered. Animalistic, like he's been hunting them. But the wounds, they're infected with some kind of pathogen. It's spreading, John. A cold dread settled in John's gut. The pit wasn't just a shelter, it was a breeding ground for something monstrous. He had to find answers, and fast. Leaving Amelia to her work, John made his way to the central control room. The corridors seemed narrower, more claustrophobic, the weight of the earth pressing down on them all. His team, Marcus, Eleanor, Sam, and Luis, were gathered around a table, a map of the pit spread out before them. "Any luck?" John asked, his voice cutting through the tension. Marcus shook his head. "We've secured the main areas, but there are too many blind spots. If Bill's been hiding, doing whatever he's been doing, it's in the old tunnels. Places we don't monitor regularly." Eleanor, a sharp-eyed woman with a knack for strategy, pointed to a section of the map. "Here, the abandoned sector. We sealed it off years ago, but it's accessible if you know where to look." John nodded, his resolve hardening. "That's our next move. We need to find out what's down there. Marcus, you and Sam take the north entrance. Eleanor, Louise, you're with me. We go in fast, we go in hard. No risks." As they geared up, the reality of their situation weighed heavily on them. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting against a darkness that had taken root in their sanctuary. The trek to the abandoned sector was tense, every shadow and sound amplified by their heightened senses. The air grew colder, more oppressive, as they ventured deeper into the bowels of the pit. The walls, once smooth and uniform, became rough and irregular, marked by the passage of time and neglect. John led the way, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. "Stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with." As they rounded a corner, a faint, rhythmic sound reached their ears, like the beating of a drum, slow and deliberate. John signaled for silence, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound grew louder, more distinct, as they approached a large, rusted door. Eleanor inspected the door, her fingers tracing the edges. Looks like it was forced open recently. John exchanged a grim look with his team. On three. 1, 2, 3. They pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The sight that greeted them was a scene from a nightmare. The chamber beyond was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows. Makeshift altars, constructed from bones and debris, lined the walls. In the center, a massive pulsating mass of flesh and sinew throbbed with a sickly light, the source of the drumming sound. John's breath caught in his throat. What the hell? The mass seemed alive, its surface rippling with each beat, tendrils of flesh stretched out, anchoring it to the walls and floor. And scattered around it, half hidden in the darkness, were bodies, dozens of them. Some were freshly dead, others in advanced stages of decay. Marcus stepped forward. It's feeding on them, on us. John forced himself to move, to think. We need to destroy it. Whatever this is, it's the source. It's infecting the pit. Eleanor nodded. We have explosives in storage, enough to bring this whole place down. As they began to back out of the chamber, a sudden movement caught John's eye. One of the bodies twitched, then another. They were moving, rising to their feet with unnatural jerks and spasms. Zombies, Sam muttered, his voice tinged with fear. We're too late. The reanimated corpses turned towards them, their eyes vacant and lifeless. John shouted, "Form up! We hold them off while Elena and Lewis get the explosives. Go!" Gunfire erupted, the echoes deafening in the confined space. John's team fought with everything they had, their bullets tearing through rotting flesh. But for every corpse they put down, 2 more took its place. Elena and Luis sprinted back to the entrance, grabbing the charges from their packs. They worked quickly, setting the timers and placing the explosives around the chamber. "Hurry up!" Marcus shouted, reloading his weapon. "We're getting overwhelmed!" Finally, Eleanor gave the signal. "Charges set. Let's move." They retreated, firing as they went, the undead horde pressing closer with each passing second. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the acrid tang of gunpowder. John led his team through the narrow corridors, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. They had minutes, maybe less, before the explosives detonated. As they burst through the final door, John hit the remote detonator. A thunderous explosion rocked the pit, followed by a series of smaller blasts. The ground shook, dust and debris raining down from above. They stumbled into the central corridor, coughing and gasping for breath. The chamber behind them was sealed, the entrance buried under tons of rubble. Just when they thought that the danger is over, a nagging doubt gnawed at his mind. The pit was vast, and they had only scratched the surface of its mysteries. The true extent of the horror they faced was still unknown. And somewhere in the darkness, the beating of that unholy heart continued, a relentless reminder that their fight was far from over. The explosion had done its work, sealing off the infected chamber and temporarily halting the spread of the unspeakable horror within. But the pit was far from safe. The tension in Pit 13 had become palpable, an invisible weight pressing down on every survivor. John Drake knew. They had only bought themselves time, not safety. The corridors of Pit 13 echoed with the sounds of unease, whispers, hurried footsteps, the occasional outburst of panic. John gathered his team in the control room, a small space crowded with flickering monitors and maps of the underground labyrinth. Marcus, his second in command, stood by the entrance, his face drawn and tense. Elena and Luis sat at the table, while Sam leaned against the wall, absently cleaning his rifle. Amelia joined them, her expression grave. John began without preamble. "We stopped it, for now. But whatever that thing was, it's not gone, and neither is the infection." Amelia nodded, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "I've done what I can for the infected, but it's spreading too fast. The symptoms are advancing. Fever, delirium, aggression. And then, transformation. They're becoming like Bill. We need to find the source, the real source, the chamber we blew up. It was just a nest. There must be something deeper." John rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of command like a physical burden. "Agreed. But we need a plan. We can't just go in blind. We need more intel, more resources." Luis, ever the pragmatist, spoke up. "There are other sectors we haven't explored, old maintenance tunnels, storage areas, places that were abandoned or forgotten." Sam, usually quiet, added, "We need to be careful. Whatever's causing this, it's smart. It's not just an infection. It's evolving, adapting." John instructed. "All right. We split into 2 teams. Marcus, you and Elena take the west sector. Sam and Luis, you're with me. Amelia, I need you to keep things stable here. Monitor the sick. Keep an eye on Bill. If anything changes, you let us know immediately." They moved out with purpose, each step a reminder of the gravity of their mission. The west sector had long been closed off, deemed unnecessary and unsafe. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper, the lights dimmer. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water from the cracked ceiling. John led his team through the narrow passages, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Every corner, every shadow seemed to hide unseen dangers. Sam's voice was a whisper. "What do you think we'll find, John?" John didn't answer immediately. His mind was a whirl of possibilities, none of them good. "Answers, I hope, and maybe a way to end this." They reached an old maintenance hatch, the metal rusted and the hinges stiff. Luis pried it open with a crowbar, the screech of metal echoing through the tunnel. Beyond the hatch was a descent, a series of ladders leading further down into the bowels of the pit. As they climbed down, the air grew colder, the darkness more complete. Their flashlights revealed a vast, open space, littered with debris and forgotten equipment. This was a part of the pit no one had seen in years. John's flashlight caught a glint of metal, a door, reinforced and bolted shut. He approached it cautiously, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. This was it. This was what they were looking for. They forced the door open with a groan. What lay beyond was a sight that made their blood run cold. The room was a lab of sorts, ancient, abandoned, but unmistakably a place of experimentation. Tables lined with vials and beakers, long since covered in dust, and in the center, a large containment unit, its glass cracked and stained. Inside the unit was a figure, humanoid, but twisted and deformed. The creature was suspended in some kind of liquid, its eyes closed, its body riddled with tubes and wires. A forgotten experiment left to rot. Lewis muttered a curse. "What the hell is that?" John approached the containment unit, his flashlight revealing more details. The creature's skin was pale, almost translucent. Its limbs were elongated, its fingers ending in sharp claws. And its face was a grotesque parody of a human, the features stretched and distorted. This is the source, John feared. This is where it all began. Suddenly, the creature's eyes snapped open. They were a deep, unnatural red, filled with a malevolent intelligence. The containment unit began to shake, the glass cracking further. The creature was waking up. "Get back!" John shouted, pulling his team away. The unit exploded, shards of glass and fluid spraying everywhere. The creature emerged, its movements fluid and predatory. It let out a guttural roar, the sound reverberating through the room. John fired his weapon, the bullets impacting the creature but barely slowing it down. Sam and Lewis joined in, their gunfire a desperate attempt to bring the monster down. But it was fast, too fast, and it lunged at them with terrifying speed. They fought with everything they had, their training and instincts kicking in. But the creature was relentless, its claws slicing through the air with deadly precision. John felt a searing pain in his side as the creature's claws raked across his flesh. "Fall back!" he shouted, pushing Sam and Louis towards the door. They retreated, firing as they went, the creature pursuing them with a single-minded fury. They made it to the ladder, scrambling up as the creature's claws snapped inches from their heels. John was the last up, his side burning with pain. He kicked the ladder down, the metal clanging as it hit the ground. The creature roared in frustration, its red eyes glaring up at them. "We need to seal this off. We can't let it get out." Sam barely speaked. He was breathing heavily. John nodded. His mind raced. "There should be a manual override for the door. We seal it and we blow the entrance. We can't let this thing reach the rest of the pit." They moved quickly, finding the control panel and activating the override. The door slid shut with a heavy thud, locking the creature inside. They planted charges around the entrance, their hands steady despite the fear gnawing at their insides. As they retreated, John hit the detonator. The explosion rocked the tunnel, the entrance collapsing in a cloud of dust and debris. They stood there for a moment, catching their breath, the reality of their discovery sinking in. John looked at his team, their faces drawn and pale. "We found the source, but this isn't over. We need to regroup, find a way to deal with this, permanently." They nodded, their resolve unwavering. The fight was far from over, but they had taken the first step, and John knew that whatever horrors lay ahead, they would face them together. As they made their way back to the main section of the pit, John's thoughts were a tumult of fear and determination. They had seen the face of their enemy, and it was more terrifying than they had ever imagined. But they would not give up. They would fight, and they would survive. Pit 13 had always been a place of uneasy existence, but now it was a cauldron of fear and suspicion. John Drake moved through the narrow aisles, his footsteps echoing on the cold concrete floor. His side throbbed with pain from the wound inflicted by the creature, but he pushed it aside. There was no time for personal agony. Amelia was at the far end, tending to the newest batch of the sick. She looked up as John approached, her face etched with worry. "How are they?" Amelia shook her head. "It's spreading faster than we can manage. The symptoms are progressing quicker now. Fever, aggression, and then the changes. We're losing them, John." He looked at the people lying on the cots, their faces flushed with fever, eyes darting around with a mix of fear and confusion. Among them he recognized old friends, people he had sworn to protect. His heart ached, but he knew sentimentality had no place here. "We have to find a solution," he said. "We can't let this take over the whole pit." "We need to quarantine the infected," Amelia said, "but we don't have the resources. And people are scared. They're hiding symptoms, afraid they'll be isolated." John nodded, understanding the gravity of their situation. "We need to get ahead of this. We need to find a cure, or at least a way to slow it down." As he turned to leave, a commotion at the entrance caught his attention. Two of his security team, Eleanor and Marcus, were dragging a struggling figure into the infirmary. It was Bill Crossman. His face was pale, his eyes wild with a mix of rage and fear. "Let me go!" Bill shouted, his voice raw. "You're all dead! You hear me? Dead!" John stepped forward, his presence commanding silence. "Bill, calm down. We need to talk." Bill's eyes locked onto John's, and for a moment there was a flicker of something almost human. Then it was gone, replaced by the madness of the infection. "You think you can stop this? You can't. It's too late. We're all going to die down here." John motioned for Marcus. "We need to keep him under observation. He might have information we can use." Bill struggled against his restraints, his voice a guttural growl. "You can't stop it, Drake. It's in the air, in the water. It's in us all. You're just delaying the inevitable." Ignoring Bill's raving, John turned to his team. "We need to secure the west sector. That's where we found the lab. There might be more clues there." Helena nodded, her face set with determination. "We'll need to gear up. That creature is still out there, and who knows what else." As they prepared to move out, John felt a hand on his arm. He turned to see Amelia, her eyes filled with concern. "Be careful. We can't afford to lose you too." He squeezed her hand, a silent promise. "We'll be back, and we'll find a way to end this." The journey to the west sector was tense. The corridors seemed to close in on them, the darkness pressing in from all sides. The air was cold and damp, each breath a reminder of the harsh reality outside the pit. They reached the collapsed entrance of the lab, the rubble still settling from their previous encounter. John motioned for Sam and Luis to start clearing a path. As they worked, John felt a presence behind him. He turned to see Marcus, his face pale. "John, there's something you need to see." He followed Marcus down a side corridor, the air growing colder with each step. They stopped at a small room, its door ajar. Inside, the walls were lined with old monitors and control panels, covered in dust and grime. But it was what lay in the center of the room that drew John's attention. A figure, slumped over a desk, its skin a sickly gray. John approached cautiously, the beam of his flashlight revealing more details. The figure was wearing a lab coat, its features distorted by the same infection ravaging the pit. "Looks like one of the original researchers," Marcus said, his voice low. "There's more, John." He pointed to a series of notebooks scattered across the desk. John picked one up, the pages brittle with age. The writing was frantic, filled with notes and diagrams. He flipped through the pages, his heart sinking as he read. "They were experimenting with something," he said. "A virus. They were trying to create a solution to the cold, something to help people survive. But it went wrong. The virus mutated, became something else. Something that turns people into monsters," Marcus finished. "Like Bill." John closed the notebook, his mind racing. "We need to get this back to Amelia. Maybe there's something here she can use." As they left the room, a sound from behind made them freeze. A low, guttural growl echoed through the corridor. John turned, his flashlight catching the eyes of the creature. It's emerging from the shadows. "Move!" John shouted, drawing his weapon. The creature lunged, its movements swift and predatory. The team opened fire, the sound of gunfire reverberating through the tunnels. They fought with everything they had, their training and instincts kicking in. The creature was relentless, its claws slicing through the air with deadly precision. John felt a searing pain in his leg as the creature's claws raked across his flesh. They retreated, firing as they went, the creature pursuing them with single-minded fury. They made it back to the main corridor, slamming the door shut behind them. John leaned against the wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "We need to get these notes to Amelia. Now." The urgency of their mission driving them forward. The corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, each step a reminder of the danger lurking in the shadows. When they finally reached the infirmary, Amelia was waiting, her face a mix of relief and concern. "What happened?" "We found the source," John said, handing her the notebooks. "A virus. They were experimenting with it, trying to find a solution to the cold. But it went wrong, very wrong." Amelia flipped through the pages, her eyes widening as she read. This might be what we need. There are notes here about potential treatments, ways to slow the infection." John nodded, his resolve strengthening. "We need to act fast, before it's too late." As Amelia began to decipher the notes, John felt a glimmer of hope. They had found a clue, a possible way to fight back against the infection. But the battle was far from over. The creature was still out there, and the virus was spreading. John looked at his team, their faces etched with determination. They had come this far, and they would see it through to the end. For the survival of Pit 13, and for the future of humanity. The air inside the infirmary was thick with anticipation. Amelia worked feverishly, her fingers flying over the fragile pages of the ancient notebooks. John Drake paced the room, his leg bandaged but throbbing with each step. The pit's generators hummed a low, anxious tune, casting flickering light across the faces of the sick and the frightened. "We need to buy time," Amelia said without looking up. "These notes, there's something here. I think I can create a serum, but it's going to take time. Time we don't have if we don't stop the spread." John stopped pacing and nodded, his face set in grim determination. "Do what you need to do, Amelia. We'll handle the rest." John gathered his team, Eleanor, Marcus, Sam, and Louise, in a tight huddle. Their eyes were hollow, reflecting the dire situation, but there was a spark of determination in each gaze. "We have a plan," John said. "Amelia's working on a serum. We need to protect her and the others until it's ready." Marcus, ever the pragmatic one, raised an eyebrow. "And what about Bill? And that thing?" John's jaw tightened. "Bill is our biggest threat right now. He knows this place as well as we do. We need to find him, isolate him. And the creature, it has to be dealt with." Sam, the youngest and most tech-savvy of the group, nodded. "We can set up barricades, control the flow of movement within the pit. If we can channel the creature into a confined space, we might have a chance." Elena, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I saw something in the lab. Equipment we could use to create a trap. It's risky, but it might work." "Do it," John said. "Every second counts. Marcus, I need you to coordinate with the healthy members. We need everyone on board. Luis, you and I are going to find Bill." The pit was a labyrinth of cold, concrete corridors, each turn a potential ambush. John and Luis moved cautiously, their flashlights casting long shadows that danced ominously along the walls. The air was frigid, their breaths visible in the dim light. "Bill's not going to go down easy," Luis said, his voice barely above a whisper. "No," John agreed, "but we don't have a choice." They moved deeper into the pit, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the generators and the occasional scurrying of rats. It felt as though the walls themselves were closing in, the weight of the frozen world above pressing down on them. As they turned a corner, a sound made them freeze. A low, guttural growl echoed through the corridor, followed by a scraping noise. John signaled for Luis to hold back and moved forward slowly. At the end of the corridor, Bill stood hunched over, his back to them. He was muttering to himself, his voice a low, incomprehensible drone. In his hand, he held a piece of metal, sharp and blooded. "Bill," John called out. Bill turned slowly, his eyes wild and unfocused. "Drake, you think you can save them? Save yourself. It's too late. We're all infected. We're all doomed." John took a step forward, keeping his flashlight trained on Bill. "It doesn't have to end this way, Bill. We can find a cure. We can survive." Bill laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Survive? Look around you, Drake. This is the end. The world is dead. We're just the leftovers." Before John could respond, Bill lunged, swinging the piece of metal with a crazed strength. John dodged, the metal grazing his arm, and tackled Bill to the ground. They struggled, the cold floor unforgiving beneath them. Luis moved in quickly, helping to subdue Bill. They managed to secure him, using makeshift restraints. Bill continued to thrash and scream, his eyes filled with a manic fury. "Get him to the infirmary. Amelia needs to see this," John ordered. Back in the infirmary, Amelia had made progress. She looked up as John and Luis dragged Bill in. "What happened?" "He's lost it," John said, wincing as he looked at Bill. "But he's still coherent enough. Maybe you can get something useful from him." Amelia nodded and approached Bill cautiously. She injected him with a sedative to calm him down, then began her examination. As she worked, John gathered his team again. "Elena, how's the trap coming?" John asked. Elena wiped sweat from her brow. "It's ready. We used some of the old equipment to rig a containment field. If we can lure the creature into it, we can trap it long enough to do whatever needs to be done." "Good. We need to move fast. Everyone knows their roles. Let's get this done," John said. They spread out, each member taking their position. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would use bait to lure the creature into the containment field. It was a gamble, but it was their best shot. As they waited in tense silence, John's mind raced. He thought of the lives at stake, the faces of the people he had sworn to protect. The weight of leadership bore down on him, but he pushed it aside. There was no room for doubt. A sound echoed through the pit, a low rumbling growl. The creature was close. John signaled to his team, and they moved into action. The bait was set, a small bloody piece of meat that Elena had managed to procure. The creature appeared, its form monstrous and grotesque. It moved with a terrifying speed, drawn by the scent of blood. John watched from his hiding place, his heart pounding in his chest. As the creature approached the bait, Elena activated the containment field. There was a flash of light, and the creature was trapped, its body thrashing against the invisible barrier.
"Now!"
John shouted. They moved in, each member armed and ready. The creature roared, its eyes filled with a primal rage. John aimed his weapon, his hands steady, and pulled the trigger. The creature let out a final, ear-splitting scream before collapsing. The silence that followed was deafening. John lowered his weapon, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. They returned to the infirmary, where Amelia was waiting. She looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. "Did you? It's over," John said. "The creature is dead." Amelia nodded, her expression resolute. "Good, because I think I've found a way to slow the infection. It's not a cure, but it's a start." John felt a glimmer of hope. They had faced the darkness and emerged alive, but the battle was far from over. The world above was still frozen and barren, and the infection still lingered. "We'll keep fighting," John said, looking at his team. "We'll survive, for as long as it takes." As the pit settled into an uneasy calm, John knew that their journey was just beginning. They had faced unimaginable horrors, but they had also found strength in each other. And as long as they had that, there was hope. Hope was a fragile, precious thing, but it was enough to keep them going, one day at a time. Thanks for sipping tonight's tale with Haunted Brew. Don't forget to subscribe, and sleep tight if you still can.